So part of what you're describing is also the phenomenon of late stage capitalism, um, where there's so much emphasis on that other triad of um, it's both exploitation and accumulation, fame, money, and power, and all of that shown. Um, I'll make it more personal here because I love the prescription of reaching out every day to someone else and finding a way to serve and then building it into our education systems. Um, you recently retired from these 8 years of service, and you and I were talking, and I suggested, with all that you carry, maybe it would be good for you to go on retreat. Um, and then you were concerned, well, yeah, but my dear wife, she's taking care of the kids and the family, and how could I go away again after I've been so busy for all these years? I said, well, tell Alice, that she gets a week in a spa, so you do a little bit of trade-off. But anyway, um, you had, in a sense, that fame and visibility and power, uh, and even at your level, there is a question of how do you embody it? How do you show your children? And you went on a bit of a retreat. So would you talk about that, how it actually works in your own life?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, Jack. And I should say thank you so much for the encouragement to take some time and to go on a retreat. It was, again, it whetted my appetite for doing a longer retreat, and even the short time I had was so valuable and was really worth it. But a couple of things that I'm trying to do in my own life, and I'll just say very bluntly and honestly, that like I'm a work in progress too. A lot of the things I wrote about are things I have struggled with over the years, and that's one of the reasons why this work is very personal to me. Struggling with the sense of loneliness has been something I've dealt with since I was a child. But also when it came to issues around purpose, for example, I was one of millions of children who was brought up in a society where it was, in fact, wealth, power, and fame that were held up as success. And in the world of medicine that I grew up in, it was things like, are you publishing in the most elite academic journals? How much research funding are you pulling in? Are you being promoted professorship, at the academic institution you're at? Like these kind of things, which again, there's nothing wrong with any of them. They're fine in and of themselves. But when we come to tie our self-worth to them, when we look to them for our deepest source of fulfillment, that's when we fall short. And I found myself in that bucket as well. So when it comes to my children, I find myself thinking about this all the time with my wife Alice. How do we teach them to really build a life where they are anchored on that triad of fulfillment? And I know that there are many things that we're trying, but one of the things that's really important is for us to lead by example. As somebody once told me when before we had our first child, sometimes your kids will listen to what you say, sometimes if you're lucky, but more often they'll listen to what you do. They'll take from your example. And so in this phase, that's exactly what I'm trying to think about, even more so. Like, how do I build this next phase of my life around family and friends? How do I engage in a sense of service? How do I make sure my purpose key stays anchored on ultimately uh, doing what I know makes my heart sing, which is to try to contribute to ways to build community, to help people return to a sense of meaning in their own lives. So it's an ongoing effort, in my own life. But one thing I know is that if the more we're able to talk openly about these journeys that we're on, the more we're able to give visibility to the importance of these core values around relationships, purpose, and service, the easier it is for our kids to see these not as things that are off to the side, but as pathways that are really central to how they should construct and build their own lives. One last thing I should say on this, though, Jack, is that these three elements that I mentioned, relationships, purpose, and service, I find that they have to be anchored in a core virtue as well. And that virtue is love. And love has multiple manifestations. We know as generosity, as compassion, as kindness, as patience, as forgiveness. But one of the things I have worried about is, in addition to the erosion of relationships, purpose, and service, it's that core virtue of love is something that we don't talk about enough, that we don't explicitly and intentionally build in to how we raise our kids and how we shape the influences that they see. And so that's something that we're trying to do for our kids. We want them to see strength not only as the strength that you build perhaps at the gym or in your muscles, but we want them to see strength in character and a character that's rooted in love, strength in kindness, strength in compassion. I worry sometimes that the world tells people as they grow up that, if you're generous, if you're kind, then you're a sucker, that you're weak, that people are going to take advantage of you, that you've got to be the loudest voice in the room, you've got to be the most aggressive. To me, that's actually not real strength. That's bluster. But we need to make sure our kids are seeing real examples of true strength, and that comes ultimately from our ability to give and to receive love in its different forms.